everyone, it's Nancy McNally with Annie's Creative Studio. And today, do I have a fantabulous quilt for you. Isn't she pretty? I love this quilt. I love the stars that go all throughout this quilt and the secondary stars that form when you put it all together. So I'm going to teach you how to put this together, obviously, after we piece all the blocks. Now the quilt itself has only 6 different blocks. So you have your very center, and then we're going to work out and do our middle blocks, and then we're going to do our 4 corner blocks. So first of all, we have all these stars in the quilt. Now as we progress and put it all together, you're going to have secondary stars that form. So we have our obvious ones, the ones that we're piecing first, the first 6 stars, and then when we pull it all together, you're going to see this star right here come together. Okay, and you can see it on your pattern. Block off the 4 corners, you have a star forming right here, and then let your eyes come out a little bit further and you get another star, but it also looks like a cross forming, like a crisscross design forming. So this is not your typical horizontal row by row. Well, that was block by block making the row, but row by row by row that we put together horizontally or vertically. This is very different. So once we piece all the blocks, I'm going to take you step by step in how to make all this happen. So let's take a step back for a second. I know that when you see the corner blocks, it looks like we're putting triangles all the way around and then we join them together to meet the center. But look, you can't do that. Look right here. If we did that, there would be some kind of Y seam going on up in here, and we're not going to sew any Y seams. This quilt is put together from the center out. And so you've got this large flying geese unit, and here's the other one over here. And then you have this one and this one. And our Aunt Addie's blocks, which are in the 4 corners, they're going to join to this large flying geese unit, which we're all going to connect. And it makes this right there. Now, whoops, we can't leave that one out. So you see this white triangle right here? This triangle is not connected to the corner block in all of them until after we have pieced this center. So see, it's just a little bit different. I think this is a very exciting quilt. Okay, so let's move on to some organization because there are pieces and parts, and I really want to help you be organized and get the tools that you need to make it happen. There's nothing special. It's just things that I like to use that make the job easier. Number 1, I love my ironing stick. And if you've seen any of my other tutorials, I use this ironing stick especially when I'm having to open a seam. It just helps that seam because sometimes you're going to fumble with that seam to try to open it, hold the iron at the same time. Whoops. This curve, if you can see, it's got an arc right here on the end. It allows, when you lay your block on it, it kind of helps the seam to start opening up so that you can just put your finger right on it and the tip of the iron and move right along. So this is now a staple in my toolbox. When I have to cut triangles from large squares or large triangles from large squares, I'll either use these 2 rulers depending on the size of the triangle that's needed in the square, because you're cutting on the diagonal. So anytime you're cutting on the diagonal, that diagonal cut is longer than the sides of the square. If I need to use my smaller ruler or one of these just to help to line it up so I can cut right on that diagonal, these are my go-to tools to do that. And sometimes, now this is another go-to ruler that I use. It's the 12.5-inch square ruler. This is another one of my favorites. It also helps cutting larger triangles because you can use that ruler with one of the strip rulers to join together. And I will show you that when we start cutting the large ones. So the next ruler I want to show you that I have, if you don't have this in your arsenal or your tool supply, this is one you might want to get. Now I use this when I'm working with my binding, and not just for cutting, but when we get to the binding part, I'm going to have a little sample for you to show you how I use this ruler to help me with marking. And this came in really, really handy. And the next thing is I have started using little clips to also keep everything together. I love these clover clips, these wonder clips. Always have your pins nearby. And the other thing is, when I go on retreats or maybe I have to go teach somewhere, I like to also use these clear bins. They're called Creative Options. I buy them at Costco, and they come in like a stack of 5, and they're all pretty colorful. But on certain ones, I try to use the clear ones, like when I'm going to go teach, so I can just grab and go. I can see right through it. So these actually fit a 12.5-inch block. So your 12-inch blocks will fit in here. Now, here we go. It's our beautiful fabric. Oh my word. I fell in love with this fabric when we found it online. This is by Northcott. It's the Artisan Spirit Shimmer line. So if you can see, it's got little flecks of gold in it. I love this fabric, and when you look at it in the quilt as I put it all together, I love this one right here. Look at the movement that this fabric gives us in this project. It's just perfect for the movement, and I just love it so much. And this blue right here, yes, perfect. Thank you very much, Northcott, for providing this beautiful fabric line for us. And this tone-on-tone white, it adds just enough movement in the fabric to add a little bit of texture, a little bit of dimension. So thank you very much, Northcott. All right, well, it's time to get started on our first block. And our first block is the very center. We're going to start from the center and work out. And it's called our Martha Washington Star Block. So grab your pattern, get it printed, put in a new needle in your machine if you haven't done that in a while. Give your machine a little cleaning. Maybe you need a new rotary blade. Go ahead and do that. Make sure everything's nice and clean. And you know what? Check your iron. Now mine's not on. Check your iron to make sure there's nothing on the bottom and get it nice and clean, because you don't want to get anything on your project. All right, are you ready? Get your stuff together. We're going to start on page 2. Now, if you look on page 2, down in the bottom left-hand corner, that's where we are going to begin on our Martha Washington Star Block, and that's where all the cutting instructions start. So that's your medium and your dark blue down on the bottom left-hand corner of the page. And now let's continue on to page 3. And it reads, from the white solid fabric, and you're going to go through and you're going to cut all those units and label them. Please label, because we have 2 different triangles that are the same color, and you might get them confused and try to sew the wrong 2 units together. And we don't want that, do we? Our B unit, we're going to cut on both diagonals. You're going to cut here, and then you're going to turn your mat, pick up your ruler. Now the block is staying put. It doesn't move, so nothing's misaligned. I'm going to go like that, just so it's easier for me to cut. Place my ruler again, corner to corner on the diagonal, and cut. Now, my B units are ready to go. There, on the inside of these triangles, that's the bias, and the straight and the cross grain are on the outside, and that's exactly what you want. So don't forget, use your labels. I almost said use your inside voice. All right, so those were B, but now here is C. Now, we're only going to cut on one diagonal. And so I was explaining this to my friend, And she goes, I don't get it. And I said, well, number one, this is going to be a larger triangle because we're only cutting on one diagonal. And two, we're only going to deal with one bias. Now, there are different reasons that we use these types of triangles versus the other type that I just cut. And so you just have to watch your pattern closely to make sure that you don't get these confused. But if you're not paying any attention and you just think, oh, I'm going to go grab my triangle, my light triangle, and I'm going to sew it to this other unit, you might pick up the wrong one. So that's why I'm suggesting that you use your Post-it notes. So when we put these together, there's only, the bias is only right here. So when we make this unit right here, which is our pinwheel unit, this triangle is right here. So the bias is right there. It's captured in the middle, and your straight and your cross grain are on the outside. So let's grab our B triangle and our E. We're going to place E here. Here, I'll move this one out of the way. We're going to place E here, and B is right there. So now we're going to sew our E and B units together, and we're going to capture the first bias side right here with this seam. And then after we press, we're going to join our C triangle, and that's where this bias gets captured on the inside. That way your unit will not stretch at all. So let's go ahead and sew these. So there's the one we're working on. Here is our C unit. And our E and B, so if you look at number one, our assembly, step number one, we have E on our left and B is on our right. So we're going to go right sides together and we're going to sew these. By the way, did I tell you that I'm the designer of this quilt? I probably totally forgot. Yeah, I designed this quilt and I quilted it. All right, so now I have our E and B units together, and I'm going to press that seam, and then after I press the seam, we're going to trim the little triangle. Now you need to make 4 of these E and B units because we need 4 pinwheels for the middle. Now when we make our E and B units right here, we don't have a seam to match it up to when we sew our C unit on, but we will have this right in here, excuse me, this bulk right in here once we join it to our Flying Geese unit. So if you need to press it open, then feel free to press it open. Otherwise, you can just press it towards the E unit. All right. Now, we're going to lay this, and we're going to go right here. We're going to go right sides together. You're going to line tip to tip. Okay, once you have a total of 4 of these tri-square units, and they're called tri-square units because it takes 3 triangles to make it, we're going to make our pinwheel. Now I'm going to start with this one right here. Place it so that your dark triangle is on the base, or it's actually in the middle, but it's facing you. The next one will lay this way. And then we're going to form the bottom row. And see how this one's pointing away from you? Now the next one's going to point towards you. And there you go. Isn't that neat? And I love the movement. Okay, so now we're going to join unit to unit, tri-square to tri-square, and you're going to line these seams up right here. See, they will line up just like that. And of course, I'm going to put a pin in place so that they stay. So now we need to press the seams. Well, when we sew this one together, we're going to press them in opposite directions. I'm going to make sure I press these in the right direction. So if you press the seam going this way, you're going to have a lot of bulk down here. And if you press the seam going this way, you have bulk here and here. So it's really at your discretion. I'm going to press this way because there's less bulk right here. There we go. Now we're going to join the seams in the middle, or we're going to sew the center seam so that we can form our pinwheel. You're going to nest these together, put those seams right there and right there, butt them right up to each other. Now I would suggest pinning these. There's a lot of bulk going on. I've got this seam on top and it's facing the presser foot, and the seam on the bottom is coming towards me. That will actually help you in the long run if you've got that bottom seam coming towards you instead of towards the feed dogs. Because what can happen is you're sewing along and you've got this nice speed going, and the feed dogs can start pushing that seam allowance because it's trying to grab all the bulk, and it can push that seam allowance towards the seam, and then everything gets hung up. So if you've ever noticed when that's happening, that's the reason why that seam is going in the wrong direction, because the feed dogs are trying to grab, this, but yet they're over here and it's uneven, and so it can't necessarily grab all of it what it needs to, and so it's actually struggling. So that's why I sew it this way. Ta-da! There you go. Now, your next step is to press the seam. Now, if you like, you can press them. Let me open it up like this. You can make it go one way. You can press them open, or you can take and pull it apart like this. And if you got any extra threads in there, just grab some sharp little scissors and snip those threads. It won't affect it. You can spin the seam like that, and that will allow you, and I will do this on my mat, but I'm just going to demonstrate right here. See how I use my ruler stick or my ironing stick? And now see how these are already trying to go in different directions? I will take and I use my fingers and I will make these go in the right direction just like this, and I'll get this teeny tiny little pinwheel forming in the middle. And that lays nice and flat. Yes! So that is our pinwheel for the center. Now we're going to move on to the outside flying geese units to form the completed star. Now we are going to assemble the flying geese units that surround our pinwheel that's in the very middle. So we will need our A, D, and F units, and we're going to be piecing large flying geese units. Okay, we are on step 5 under assembly. So we're going to take our A unit, lay it just like this, and we have 2 Fs, and we're going to line them up like this. Now our bias is right here, and it's going to be captured in the middle. So we're going to align this tip down here to this tip right here. So I scooch it down, hold it in place with my finger, make sure the raw edge to raw edge is aligned, and I'm going to put 2 pins in to hold it, because you know it never fails. You pick it up and you take it to your machine, and somewhere from this point to this point it moves, and you don't realize it moves until after you've sewn it and you go to make sure it's the right size or make sure it joins up to the next piece and something's not quite right. So I have learned the hard way that yes, pinning is okay. All right, so let's sew this. We're going to repeat the process. Take our other F triangle, line up the bottom, tip to tip, pin it in place, and sew. Now here's what I do when I am going to make sure that my flying geese units are lined up. This is one reason why this is one of my favorite rulers. Let me see if you can see this. I'm going to place it right here on the table to see if you can see this. Can you see this X right here where these two white lines come together? Right there. That, where those two lines cross, I'm going to place them right there on the tip of my flying geese where the two F or the dark triangles come together. And that is my intersection. And when you align it up, now I can trim off anything that's past that because that's my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And it'll be, my flying geese forms a perfect 45-degree angle, which is what we want. So I'm going to hold the ruler in place and trim. And see, if I would have left that tiny little bit in or on the flying geese unit, it would have made the flying geese unit just look a little bit off. And this way, it's not off. Oh, there it is. Okay, let's trim off this one too. There we go. Okay, so now you need to make 4 of these. So our next step is we are going to grab our pinwheel. Here, let me place this so you can see everything. Now I'm going to lay it out first, and now we're going to grab our D squares. Now if you're using a tone-on-tone fabric, double check that you have the right side facing up. Now we're going to join everything together so that we can finish our Martha Washington star block. So our first step is we need to sew a square to one side of our flying geese unit and then the other square, and we're going to repeat that process down here, and then these two get sewn to the pinwheel. So let's do that. Now yes, I'm going to pin. Now I'm going to chain piece these. So if you've never done this before, you can try this. So I've sewn the first flying geese unit to my corner block. Next, I'm going to take the pinwheel and align it to the flying geese unit that's on its left. Pin in place. Now there's a lot of bulk coming in here, so make sure that you take your time in sewing this together, and there really is no way that I can make sure that that seam allowance is not going to get stuck underneath the feed dogs like I was talking about earlier. So you're just going to have to take your time in sewing. Don't put the pedal to the metal and try to fly through it, okay? That just makes it worse. If you need to add your walking foot onto the machine at this point in time so that you can sew through all this bulk, then do so. See how they're all connected right here with one little thread. This keeps them in order. Now I just take my scissors and I separate them. There we go. we need to press. Now for the top flying geese unit with sewing onto the squares, you're going to press towards the squares, the corners. And for the pinwheel, you're going to press towards the pinwheel. Now place everything back in the order that it was, and we're going to attach the other side, which is the right-hand side, and follow the same procedure. Right sides together, raw edge line up. All right, so now we have 2 seams left, and all you have to do, oh, I just love it, it's so pretty. All you have to do is you're going to place your top row onto your center pinwheel row. You're going to pin, you're going to match all your seams up. You're going to match them up just like this so that you go seam to seam. They butt up against each other. Place a pin in to hold everything in place, and you're going to sew, and you're going to do the same thing down here. You're going to repeat the process, and you get this beautiful Martha Washington star. Absolutely love this block. Okay, we have the center block done. Now it's time to move on to our next block. All right, see you in the next class. Bye for now.